Hello, everybody. Welcome to Amar's Game Chat. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I am Amar, and today I wanted to record this video just to talk about the September 12th, 2025 Nintendo Direct. At the time of uploading, we should be around a day removed from the Direct. I am recording it a little bit earlier than that, around 12 hours removed from the Direct, but I just want to talk about it. I always do a video soon after the directs air, just talk about the announcements and some of the news, and just basically the games that they announced. Because in a reaction, we don't always have all the information, and we don't really always have the time to be able to talk about everything that they showed off. So I want to always try to do this complimentary video for the directs. Just talk about my thoughts, log my thoughts out there. And yes, so without further ado, let us get right into actually doing that. So yeah, I just want to start this video by saying that I really like this direct. After the direct ended in my reaction video, I did say that I really liked it, and I think it is one of my favorite directs of all time. And I think I hold to that still. I usually say something like that for every direct. Like, I think it's really good, and it could be one of my favorites. But I think that holds true with this direct, because even though it didn't have like the big announcements, obviously I think, in my opinion, the Pokemon announcements are pretty big, and obviously Mario Galaxy, like Mario Galaxy Collection, is pretty big. Like, the big new games wasn't really announced here. Like, we didn't get a new 3D Mario or a new Animal Crossing, like some people expected, including myself. I expected to see maybe what it would be the next big console seller or system seller after Pokemon Legends EA releases this October. And in some ways, that is going to be Tomodachi Life. Tomodachi Life, I think, will be a little bit of a resurgence both for the Switch, and then, well, it will be a resurgence for the Switch a little bit, and then it will help boost sales for the Switch 2 to a certain extent, especially if they make a Switch 2 edition and then they do like a bundle with the console with a Tomodachi Life. But I was thinking that maybe they would do that, and they didn't do that. But I think what they did give us instead was a 9-month schedule, pretty much. We only got a couple dates here, so we inevitably probably get another direct in the earlier part of next year, like around February, March. That gives us a lot more dates for the games they showed off here, some of the games that they didn't show off here, and then maybe one or two more, retail releases from Nintendo. But yeah, so I think what they did give us here was that 9-month release schedule. And I think that's what they aimed to do, because obviously, those are the games that they included. Those are the games that they have on the release schedule, surrounding events like the Mario movie, which is now called the Super Mario Galaxy movie. But yeah, so I think they were really successful with that. I think we saw what we got all the games for this year dated. So unless there is I'm thinking maybe like an eShop surprise, I don't think we're gonna see any more games be dated for this year or be announced for this year. And then we got 5 or so games for next year. Well, I think it's 5, maybe 6, but that includes the 2 games that were slated for next year, or slated for some point in the near future. That's not this year, but they didn't show up in the direct. So I think that's a very solid lineup, and I think they did it well. I think the only critique I would really have with this direct is, I think with the Mario segment being such a big segment, and having, what would normally be announcements that would have been spread out through a direct, Galaxy would have been like a middle, Yoshi probably would have been a middle, Mario Tennis could have been like a headline, but they had them all in, one 20-minute bite-sized portion of this direct. I think that did mess with the pacing a little bit. I think some of the headline sections was a little shorter than they normally would have been in a direct, but that's not really a huge thing, because obviously I think, while the pacing might have been an issue, the contents weren't an issue. Again, like another like smaller thing would have been maybe, I know obviously Fire Emblem. Let me make sure I get the name right, so I'll be right back. There's so many, games they announced. I got to make sure I get all the titles right. But Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, I would have honestly had that as the opener in this direct. And I know that's something like I don't think they were wrong to have it as the closer because it is going to be a big game. Fire Emblem is a big series for Nintendo. But I think when you have Mario announcements at the beginning, it kind of, I think those do fit better as a closer, especially for the 40th anniversary. Those were big announcements. Fire Emblem was a big announcement. I think having Fire Emblem first, get everyone excited. There's a new Fire Emblem coming. And then you end on something like Super Mario Galaxy and a new Yoshi game and Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 edition and Mario Tennis like all at once, just in another like 20-minute sized bite. At the end of the direct, I think that would have worked better. Um, in terms of the reception coming out of the direct, because again, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave looks really good. All the Mario games look really good. But we will get to discussing that, when we get to those portions. And I guess we can get to one of those portions now with the Mario segment. I think it was really well done overall. We had, again, I keep mentioning it, 20 minutes of Mario 40th anniversary news here. That included the announcement of the title for the next Mario movie, which is the Super Mario Galaxy movie. So that means we will be going to space, probably meeting characters like Rosalina, maybe the Honeybee Queen, stuff like that. But I think that's very cool that they're doing that. A while back, the rumored title was Super Mario World. And I think they could still use that title maybe for the third movie. But I mean, I think Galaxy works because they may actually be going in a couple of different directions with the Mario movie going forward. Mario movie franchise, like as a series going forward. Because we didn't see like Seth Rogen be confirmed as Donkey Kong appearing in this movie. And I think that's because they probably have a Donkey Kong project in the works that makes sense. Donkey Kong wouldn't be going with them to space. Instead, he would probably be at DK Island and hanging out with Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong and Cranky Kong and maybe Funky Kong. But I think that makes sense, and I think that's what we're building up to. I think maybe we're at the point where we can start speculating about the movie now. I think maybe like the post credit scene, like it was with Yoshi, is like a Donkey Kong teaser, especially if he's not in the movie. But I think that was a really cool reveal. And then obviously with that reveal, we have the confirmation that the movie will be based on the games to a certain extent, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. And because of that, they have decided to re-release them on the Switch. There will be retail Switch releases that have enhancements on the Switch too, which I think is just really cool. I think it's, obviously 3D All Stars released 5 years ago and it had Galaxy in it, and everyone was wondering where was Galaxy 2. I think honestly it works a lot better now to have Galaxy and Galaxy 2, and maybe that was the plan all along, who knows. But whatever, Nintendo's thought process was, I think it really worked out for them now to have both Galaxy and Galaxy 2 all in one combo pack. Releasing at the beginning of October, which is also very soon. Within the next month, we will be playing Galaxy and Galaxy 2 on the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. And I think that's really awesome. But, we had that. And again, that's a very cool announcement, very cool games. But, that wasn't in my opinion, that wasn't the biggest announcement from this portion. And though the biggest announcement was instead Mario Tennis Fever, because that's a new Mario Tennis game. It looks really good. It seems like that I believe it's gonna be made by Camelot, but it seems like Camelot has really learned a lot from what they did with Mario Tennis Aces. And they made the roster a lot bigger. It's 38 characters at launch. I'm assuming there will be post-launch characters as well. But it seems like they've learned a lot from Aces. It seems like this game is definitely building upon the base that Aces laid. With the story mode and some of the game modes and everything. It seems like the fever mechanic is maybe an evolution of the, I'm not sure if it's called the ace mechanic, but like where you're able to like slow down time and Mario Tennis Aces. It seems like it's a little bit of an evolution of that. But I think it's a lot more fun of an evolution because this has like different like characteristics that the ground can turn to ice depending on the racket you use. You can use a fire racket and it can burn your opponents. You can have a mushroom racket and you like throw mini mushrooms at your opponent and they become small, and that probably makes it harder to hit the ball back. Or maybe like they would have a shorter distance that they can hit the ball, so maybe like they can't hit it over the netting depending on like how far back they are. But I think this game, was the biggest game, at least for me, from this section. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 collection and this are pretty high up there as the biggest games in this section. But I think those were big announcements and very big announcements, in my opinion. And then they followed up with two, I think, still pretty big announcements in Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, which one of the reasons why I'm making this video is because we did get a little bit more information on that. Not necessarily confirmed information, but we have seen that I believe there is a couple of single player maps because they did focus a lot on the multiplayer levels. But it does seem like there's some stuff you can do single player, which is gonna be very fun. And maybe to tie in with Galaxy, maybe not. It does seem that Rosalina is going to be playable in that game, and I think that's very cool. It is releasing in spring of 2026, and Mario Tennis is releasing in February, so maybe it's a tie-in with the movie. Obviously Galaxy is the big tie-in, but I think it would make sense to have something a little bit closer to the movie's release, or maybe two things, because we also did get Yoshi in the Mysterious Book, which is also a very cool game. It looks very beautiful, very gorgeous, in my opinion. And I think, those two games being around March, April, around the movie does make a lot of sense. Obviously, Yoshi has a big part in Super Mario Galaxy 2, and they teased Yoshi for Super Mario Galaxy, the movie. So I think it makes sense having Yoshi there. And maybe it really depends on how Nintendo wants to approach it. If they want to have Yoshi like before the movie releases, so then everyone can come out of the theaters and be like, I want to play the next Yoshi game, and the game is already on shelves, they can do that. But obviously, Super Mario Bros. Wonder also has Yoshi in it, so they could have one before and then maybe one a little bit after. I don't really think it makes that big of a difference. But they both definitely do seem like they're tie-ins to the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which is, it's very cool to have games that, maybe, obviously, I don't think Yoshi was made solely for the reason to be a tie-in game, to be on the shelves while the movie's going like in theaters. But I guess that's just really how these things work out. It's possible Nintendo had this game finished for a very long time now, and they just held on to it for they knew Yoshi would be teased in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and they decided we want to have this game ready for the sequel to the movie. But the interesting thing here overall is we got 3 Nintendo Switch 2 announcements here. One older game in the form of Super Mario Bros. Wonder getting Nintendo Switch 2 edition, but Mario Tennis Fever and Yoshi and Mysterious Book are exclusives to Nintendo Switch 2. And I think that does speak a little bit to the way that Nintendo's going to be approaching Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 going into the future. Largely in the fact that I think, obviously, we are in the twilight years of the Switch, so I don't really know how many more announcements they have to make. I think they still have a couple more. Besides Mario Galaxy, we did not get like Mario Galaxy Collection. I don't think we got any first-party announcements for the Switch, and I think we have 1 or 2 more smaller games, maybe a couple of ports coming to the Switch, and that's probably something that they're holding on to for again an early year direct next year, where Tomodachi Life may have already released or needs to get like another push. Galaxy would have already released at that point. Maybe Rhythm Heaven would have already released at that point. which we'll talk about Rhythm Heaven in a little bit. But I think, again, I think this really speaks to they are pushing ahead with the Switch 2. There was some speculation before the Switch 2 launch that Nintendo's going to want to try to have a much larger cross gen period than they've had in the past. But I think having Mario Tennis and Yoshi and, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment and, you know, a number of games be exclusive to the Switch 2 does show that they do want to move on, not fast, like in a very like fast sense, but they are largely moved on to the Switch 2, and I think that makes sense for them. But we reached the end of that segment. We also had the smaller announcements of like the Rosalina storybook is getting a physical version that you can read through and look through. It won't have the new pages that the Galaxy, that Galaxy's introducing. That may tie into the movie, who knows? But still, I think that's a very cool announcement. We got a couple of smaller things that Nintendo's doing in Japan, and then we got a talking flower to go alongside Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 edition. And I think that's really cool. A physical talking flower. It didn't seem based on the little like flavor text at the bottom. It didn't seem like it's gonna be something that you can really like do much interactivity with. It seems like there's just a button you press and it will talk. A number of different lines from Super Mario Wonder. But still, I think those are two pretty cool merchandising options. I mean, not merchandising options, but like merch and ways to celebrate the Mario anniversary without having to do like a new game, like a huge new game or anything. But we did reach the end of that segment, and then we went into what I think was probably the shortest segment in general for this direct, and that was the Switch 1 games. And I think that makes sense. Again, I think Nintendo's moving on from the Switch. We'll definitely still be getting third-party games. We do still have games like Dragon Quest 1 plus 2 HD releasing on it, 2 HD 2D releasing on the console. We still obviously have a couple of Nintendo first-party games in the form of Pokemon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4 and Tomodachi Life Living the Dream and Rhythm Heaven Groove. So, there's definitely, at least I think we're gonna have at least one more direct with a section focused on the Switch going into the future. But again, it was a smaller segment. I believe this segment did end on Tomodachi Life, which makes sense. Again, having a couple of games for the Switch that are releasing on the Switch, and then having the big, pretty much what's gonna be the last big Switch game after Pokemon releases this October in the form of Tomodachi Life just be shown off. It's still being branded as a Switch game. I wouldn't be surprised if the next direct maybe reveals that it is getting a Switch 2 edition, because at this point it seems like that's also just the next big game for Nintendo, following Pokemon. Obviously Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment and Metroid Prime 4 and Kirby Air Riders are also big, but I think like Tomodachi Life is the one game beyond Pokemon that they have on the release slate that has a good chance of selling like 10 million copies. So I wouldn't be surprised if they also make a Nintendo Switch 2 edition for that, to both give the Switch a little bit of a resurgence in its probably like one more push for getting Switch retail units off the shelf, but also giving a little bit of the boost, a little bit of a boost to the Switch 2 sales by making a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of it, maybe like making a bundle. But yeah, Tomodachi Life looked really cool. It does seem like they're bringing back the Mii Maker from Miitopia, which is going to be very, very fun to just see. I think a lot more people are going to buy Tomodachi Life as well, so we're going to see a lot more, I think, creative and creatively made Miis and using that new Mii Maker, which is going to be really fun. They showed that you can make, you can, in practicality, like make two of your Miis become friends just by making them close to each other, which is really interesting. That's not really hard worked in Tomodachi Life, the first on the 3DS game. They just naturally became friends, but it seems like you can have a little bit of a play into the way your Miis live, which is gonna be really interesting. And it looked really fun. Tomodachi Life, it looks really fun. It is slated for spring. Yoshi is also slated for spring. Yoshi in the Mysteries book, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Again, uh, Nintendo Switch 2 edition. They're all three of them are slated for spring. I already mentioned, I think Yoshi and Super Mario Bros. Wonder probably release around the movie just to be like a little bit of a tie-in. You know, two new games on the shelves with the movie being in theaters. I think that makes sense. But Tomodachi Life Living the Dream looks like a dream, and I think that's very cool. And then following that, we basically got, a couple more headlines. Hades 2 is, I believe, is releasing on September 25th. It is published by Nintendo, which probably also helps for the fact that it is a console time exclusive. So with the Switch 2, so that makes a lot of sense. So I think that's very cool. We got the announcement of Kirby Air Rider amiibo figure, Air Riders amiibo figures, which all look really cool. They're launching with Kirby and Banana Waddle Dee, but they have confirmed that they will be making more amiibo figures in the future, which is very cool, and that we will be having another Kirby Air Riders Nintendo Direct, probably in October. I'm assuming maybe early October, like around a month before the game launches. So that's gonna be very cool just to see some more Air Riders. Probably they're gonna show off the story mode and like additional mode. I don't think it's gonna be like the 45 minutes that we got for Air Riders in the direct last month. But still, I think it'll be a pretty cool direct nonetheless. And then we went into Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment. It was dated for November 6th, 2025. So in my predictions, I did say that I think a game would be slated for that date. I was thinking it would be Metroid Prime 4. It ended up being Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment, which is totally fine, because Metroid Prime 4 obviously is dated for this year still, so I'm glad that both of them are releasing this year. But Age of Imprisonment looks pretty good. It didn't seem like they showed off anything like that was too different from what we've already seen before. They showed off like split screen and like some of the ways that the characters interact with each other, which is really cool. But it does seem like this trailer was in here because it is going to be playable at Tokyo Game Show, so they did have to show off like some of the actual playing, the ways that you play using the characters, just because obviously otherwise people would just be talking about it, and maybe there wouldn't even be footage for it yet, or like it would be like off-screen footage. So I think here they explain those features. It probably also removes a lot of the confusion that may have come out of a demo at Tokyo Game Show. And then we got other big announcements like Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, which is a Switch and Switch 2 game. I'm assuming it's probably like some like resolution upgrades and everything on the Switch 2, so that's gonna be very cool. I haven't really played many Dragon Quest games, so I knew it was Dragon Quest like right when I saw the characters, but that'd be a cool game to jump into. I think it looks very fun, so I'm very excited just to at least hear and see people play it and like what their thoughts are on it as a remake overall. And then we got other games. We got Virtual Boy is coming to the Nintendo Switch Online through Nintendo Switch Classics, and they're releasing like official hardware to go alongside it, which is very awesome, I think. And it just looks really cool. Obviously Virtual Boy is like one of those wacky Nintendo things that Nintendo is just doing. I think it's making Nintendo Classics very much a history thing for Nintendo as well. Getting these consoles that obviously the Virtual Boy wasn't necessarily a success, but Nintendo's still going back and adding the games from the Virtual Boy onto NSO Classics and releasing hardware that looks like it that you can use to obviously play in the same format that those games are released in. I think it's just very cool. And very, I was honestly, when it was revealed, I was a lot more surprised that they were doing Virtual Boy. I didn't really, it was just a very wacky thing for Nintendo to do, and it kind of goes with like wacky Nintendo, and I think that's very cool. And then obviously we got a couple of other headlines. Again, we got games like the remake of Fatal Frame 2, We got a couple Nintendo Switch 2 editions. We got Power Wash Simulator. We got what I call, the fruit game where you're combining different like fruits into become bigger fruits. Because I don't really know this. I think it's called Sekua, or Sukia or something like that. Something along those lines. But and then we kind of transitioned again into another big announcement again, but I've already talked about, and that's Metroid Prime 4. It is now dated for December 4th, I believe, December 4th, 2025. So it is releasing this year. It has a set release date. So after over 8 years, it will be finally releasing. That is just very exciting. They confirmed 3 new amiibos for it, both a Samus and a Silux amiibo, as well as Samus on Viola, which is the motorcycle that we saw in the trailer. And I think that's very, very cool. And they also confirmed early on, I didn't mention it, but they're also doing amiibos for Super Mario Galaxy. I'm not really sure how those amiibos will work in game. We're getting a Mario and a Rosalina amiibo, so again, I'm not sure how those are gonna work. They look really cool. I've already pre-ordered them just because they seem, they're like, in a lot of ways, I think they are amiibos that more novelty in a sense. We don't usually get. They're really detailed, and I think again, they're Galaxy amiibos. Who knows if we would ever get another set of Galaxy amiibos? So I just think that was a really cool thing for Nintendo to do. And then we got an expansion for Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I'm surprised this honestly wasn't included in the Mario section. Obviously, it makes sense. Donkey Kong at this point is very much. It seems like a very separate thing, especially if they're separating like Donkey Kong in the movies and the Illumination projects. So we got Donkey Kong, Bonanza paid DLC. They've already added, because they released today, DK Island and the Emerald Rush, which is a roguelite. What I thought of it as is like a roguelite, like side order and Splatoon Salmon Run. Where we have specific goals we have to hit, and we have I've already played through it. I mean, I haven't played the full thing yet, but it is very cool. It's a $20 add-on. I think it's worth the $20 because it gets a whole new area. It's a special new little addition mode. I don't know. I haven't played that much of it to see if there's new collectibles besides the statues that they talked about in the direct. But still, I think it's just very cool. It is like the Mushroom Kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey, and I've seen this comparison. It's like the Mushroom Kingdom and the addition of Luigi's Balloon World in Super Mario Odyssey. So again, I think that is very, very cool, and I have had a lot of fun playing with it so far. Because on my save file, I've already 100% completed Donkey Kong Bonanza, so I am very happy with this edition. I was honestly not expecting something like this to even happen with Donkey Kong Bonanza ever. I was expecting maybe a free update, but they really went in, and I think they did a good job with this DLC. And then at this point we're pretty much at the back end of the direct. But that doesn't mean that they didn't have big announcements still. We had 3 major Pokemon announcements. And again, I think I'm going to do a video on, just talking about the Pokemon stuff, just because it is a lot. And obviously, this channel has a somewhat focus also on, it's like Nintendo is the main focus, but Pokemon's like the first sub-focus. And they announced Pokemon, let me make sure I get the name right, Pokopia, which is, it seems like what I was referring to it in the reaction as a Pokemon Animal Crossing, and it seems like it's also that, but it also seems like it's like a Dragon Quest Builders Pokemon game. It's Game Freak and Koei Tecmo, and I believe I've heard that Koei Tecmo also worked on Dragon Quest Builders. So it honestly just looks like a very cool spin-off. I don't know if they would ever like do another game in this series. Obviously, it depends on how successful this is, but it could be a one-off, and I think it'd be a very fun one-off. I'm very much looking forward to playing it when it releases. Right now we don't have a release window for it, So we'll probably find out more about it at the Pokemon Presents, which I was like doubting if they would do one in the reaction, but I don't I don't think they're gonna skip it because I think that's also where they're gonna announce Generation 10. But still, I think we're probably gonna get a date for Pokepia in that direct. I mean that presents. It'll probably be releasing like in, I'm thinking, May or June, to go along with like the middle section of the year. It's out of the way by the time Legend or Generation 10 releases. And yeah, it looks very cool. I'm very excited to play it once it releases. It has Pokemon seemingly for every single generation, which again is gonna be very cool. Seeing the ways that they interact, because obviously you're a Ditto, so you can copy some of their abilities, and that's basically how you help build your island in this game, which is just gonna be very very fun, I think. But in my opinion, obviously that was like a smaller announcement to what they did next. And that was a huge segment on Pokemon Legends EA confirming 3 Mega Evolutions for Chestnut, Delphox, and Greninja, so the Kalos starters. They all look very cool and very well done as Mega Evolutions, so that is very awesome. The game is obviously releasing on October 16th. But before the game even releases, we have confirmation that they are also doing an expansion for the game, and in the form of paid DLC. We don't have a release date for it yet, but it does say as like a description for the DLC: dive into hyperspace Lumios and continue your Pokemon adventure. So that is honestly just gonna be very fun. It seems like it's very Hoopa focused, which ultimately, we have had our obviously Legends ZA is focused on Zygarde. So we're going to have Zygarde as a major focus. And now we're also going to have Hoopa as probably like a smaller focus. I'm assuming Zygarde is also going to have some play in this, like in this DLC, maybe have like a new form or something. Maybe gets like 1,000% form in the DLC, and that's why maybe it's like a future, much more future Lumiose or something like that. But the DLC is called Pokemon Legends ZA Mega Dimension. So we are going through many dimensions. They confirmed Mega Raichu X and Mega Raichu Y, and we don't really have a set release window on it yet, but if you go to the pre-order page right now, it does say that the story expansion is supposed to release by February 28th, 2028. I mean 2026. So the day after Pokemon Day next year. So I expect it to be out by then. There's a chance obviously it releases this year, in the later part of December, around the time that the DLC released for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the Indigo Disc. But I'm expecting it more so to release probably in January, or at the latest on Pokemon Day next year. And it looks very cool. We haven't seen much of it yet. We've only seen like 1 or 2 screenshots of what the DLC actually is. But again, I'm very much looking forward to playing Legends EA, playing Pokepia. I think those are pretty big announcements. Pokepia, it does seem like they're still working on it, because it does look a little rough around the edges. But again, it's a game they're still working on. I think it's a game that they're still building upon, so I'm very very excited for it. But pretty much we're at the end of the direct at this point. We got a couple of other smaller announcements. We saw Monster Hunter Stories 3 again from the partner showcase. Got the confirmation of, I believe, a Danganronpa remake, or like a remaster that includes additional content. We got our sizzle reel, which included a couple of Switch 2 games. But the direct closed on pretty much 2 big announcements in the form of Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9. The most recent Resident Evil is releasing on the Nintendo Switch 2 on February 27th, 2026. All 3 of them, all on that day. So Resident Evil Requiem, Resident Evil 9 is releasing on all platforms on February 27th, 2026. So that's day and date with the Switch 2. And then obviously they probably want to, bring over as much Resident Evil as possible. So they're going to have them all on the same day for the Switch 2, which is very, very interesting, very fun, I think. But the closer for this direct was Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. It seems like it is some sort of game that's going to be connected to Fire Emblem Three Houses based on the fact that I always mess up the name. So I believe it's um Solris, not Solris, but the like your mentor to a certain extent in Fire Emblem Three Houses. She is also present in the game towards the end. And she's like teasing us about how we forgot her. So it seems like it's going to be either a sequel or a prequel or just a different like universe game to the, following Pokemon, not Pokemon, Fire Emblem Three Houses and Fire Emblem Three Hopes. And yeah, it looks really cool. Again, I think being the closer did do a little bit of a disservice to it because it did put it in a position where a lot of people were expecting that big announcement like a 3D Mario or an Animal Crossing to be. I think again, it being the opener would have been a lot better for it because I think it would have also gotten a lot more eyes, a lot more of a positive reaction to it. But I think it looks very good. I think it looks very fun. I'm very much looking forward to playing it once it releases. I'm thinking probably in June or July, around the same time that Three Hopes and Three Houses released. But yeah, it looks really cool. Again, it seemed like I was honestly thinking it seems like some of the characters may be connected to Claude and Elgard and Dimitri from Three Houses. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But yeah, that was the entire direct. That was basically just I like doing these videos just because I want to give a little more thoughts on the games that were announced. This direct was really good. Again, maybe I was I don't know if it's like my favorite direct of all time, but it definitely is up there. My favorite directs usually are the June ones because normally those are loaded heavily on what the big games for that year is going to be because normally at that point we don't have them announced yet. But obviously this year we had the big games for this year already announced, so they gave us pretty much what games we should expect leading, I think, into June or July of next year, which is also why I think Rhythm Heaven could get like Nintendo Switch 2, not Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo Today news that give us both the release date and a new trailer for it, and it could be releasing in January of next year. So I think it'll be very fun. But I think that's also the reason why we didn't see Splatoon Raiders here is because I think these games that we saw here are releasing by June and July. I think Splatoon Raiders at this point probably is a September game or like a late summer game. And so I think an early direct next year, we see it again. We get the full teaser, full reveal of it. It gives it I'm not sure if they'll give like a full release date yet, but they give it like a fall 2026 release date. And then we see it, release at later next year. But again, I had a really good time with this direct. I think it was very fun to watch. And then go back and just see other people's reactions and see what other people's thoughts were on the direct overall. I'm very much looking forward to the next 9 months of the Nintendo Switch 2. I think we have a lot of games in store, a lot of fun experiences. We by I think February of next year, by the end of February next year, we possibly could have the entire 2026 lineup pretty much announced in the form of a direct and Generation 10 Pokemon Presents. So I think I'm gonna around that point, I might do another video just talking about both of those directs as one, because I think that would likely give us like a year worth of just new game announcements. And I think that'll be a pretty fun thing to look back at. But that is all I have for you all today. I had a really fun time again with this direct. I had a lot of fun just watching it, seeing how they handled the Mario 40th anniversary, how they handled the rumored at that point Pokemon spin-off. When the Dragon Quest game was being revealed, Dragon Quest 7, Dragon Quest, let me get the right name before I mess up the name. Dragon Quest Reimagined, Dragon Quest 7 Reimagined. When they were revealing that, I thought that was like the Pokemon spin-off. I thought that was Pokemon Ranger. But Dragon Quest 7 Reimagined, which is also as cool as Pokemon Ranger. So that is all I have again for you all today. I was very happy with this direct. I am very much looking forward to the rest of the year for Nintendo, and after that, the next 6 months of Nintendo. And yeah, so I will see you on the next one. Make sure to make sure happy because rhymes are generic Cappy. My previous name is generic Cappy. My reaction will be linked down in the description below if you haven't checked it out already. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.